training. Uh, this training will talk about customizing the ribbon, and we will create a button to help us create contact records by automatically populating some fields. And this will be a training task, let's say, so it will populate the fields with constants, but to implement useful functionality, this can use, for example, some service uh, from outside, some external service, and which uses, for example, artificial intelligence to guess some of the data that we need to input. But the example will be simpler than that. And in this training, we will follow these steps. We will introduce the ribbon, then introduce a plugin from XRM Toolbox, which is the ribbon workbench. And after introducing these two concepts, we will create the JavaScript web resource that will handle the button click, let's say, and then which is called the command in Dynamics. And then we will deploy this customization in the system and do a quick demo, try our functionality. Let's start with the ribbon. The ribbon, it's not a complex one. It's this toolbar here. That's why I said it's the toolbar. And every view, let's say, and every form has a ribbon with different commands that we can execute in the system in given some state of the view or of the form. For example, this is the view, and I have these commands here that I can execute, like, for example, import data, and these are context sensitive, most of them, which means that if I will try to import data here, some of the required fields will be set up to import accounts, for example. But those are just for some small, they're only to give us some small help, but doesn't mean that they are set in a read-only state, for example. We can change them afterwards, but they just as with the advanced find, which gives us a context and looks for accounts, but we can change the fields. So this is the ribbon. It contains a lot of commands, and most of them, the visibility or the enabled state of those depends on the form state or on other logic that you can configure. For example, we can make it show only if the form has a field of a certain type, or we can make a button show only on create and not on edit, which is this view. Only when I click the new button, which is the create form, I get a lot less commands here that I can execute on a form which is on the create state. And we will see in the ribbon workbench that there is only one ribbon, let's say, for this form, and the buttons that get shown or hidden, let's say, are configured with some logic, and there in the same place there we will see all the buttons and the logic that they have. So this was really a brief introduction to the ribbon, because customizing it, for example, normally we would have to modify an XML file, and there are a lot of magic strings, and it's really complicated to do manually. And we have to thank a lot, let's say, Scott Duro, which is the one which created this ribbon workbench tool. It comes in two forms. Um, we can import a solution in our system, which gives us that capability to modify the ribbon, or we can use the XRM toolbox and get it as a plugin there. And I prefer the XRM toolbox one because it does not add a solution just for a tool that we need. Since it's a tool, it's better to use it with our tool set. And I haven't installed it, so I have to search for it. And it's a ribbon on workbench, this one. And I didn't install it, so I can show you from the beginning, including the installation. So now that I installed it, I can connect to my system and ribbon workbench. Yeah, okay. And now, as you can see, this customization requires a solution, and I have two here to because we need the interface, let's say, of the small. We need to have only a small subset of our customization shown here because this tool will let's say unpack and pack again our package because solutions are a package. If you noticed when we did the training with the solutions, I downloaded a zip file, and this is what this does. It downloads a zip file, modifies the XML file with a graphical interface, and then re-uploads the modified file. So to start, we need to go and create a solution because it has a limitation that you must include only the entity that you are trying to modify, or the number of entities has to be low because of computational efforts, let's say. Because if it has a lot of entities, then it cannot handle the unpacking and modification and packing. So let's create our solution. Our goal is, I want to just remind you again, our goal is to create a button that will help us fill some fields in the create contact form. So create contact autofill. And I want to add an existing entity. Which is contact. Okay. Okay, feedback in the training, it's not permitted. And now I have my contact entity, and I included, let's say, the main form for the contact. And I'll do a shortcut here. I'll create an web resource which will contain our script, our command, and I'll just create it empty so I can reference it from the ribbon workbench, but I'll implement the functionality after I finish with the ribbon workbench. So I wanted to do new, and then I can call this commands, and it was contact dot autofiller, autocomplete, autofiller. It's important to keep some naming. Let's say I use the organization with the directories by using the slash, and I'm naming my plugins or my commands. Let's call them whatever we like. By pointing out which entity it's working on and what it does. But the naming convention can be whatever we feel is right, let's say, or whatever we get from the client as a requirement. One good practice, let's say, is to put the extension, let's say the extension in relation to the type of the file. So you cannot create it because it's empty, and now we can create it because it has a space. You can call my friend Felice and tell him that even in Dynamics you can save empty files. So I'll publish, so I have the reference in the solution, and as we can see, our solution is not shown here because I have to refresh to see the create contact out of field. And what it's doing is downloading the solution like we do with manually by exporting as unmanaged, and now it's doing the assembling solution, which means it's unpacking the files and parsing all the scripts which are in XML and creating this interesting view, which are for our entity, which is the contact entity, because we only had that entity. We can change what happens in the contact main tab or homepage grid, subgrid, and form. What we want to do is to add a new button in the form ribbon. And now I am in the account, so I'll go in the contact, and I want to add a button in the ribbon that will show only on the create, because I want to autofill some data when I'm creating new contacts. And here we will see a button, which will be our button, which does autofill, will choose which fields it will autocomplete, let's say. And so I'm going to just here from the toolbox, we have different types of buttons, let's call them, or UI items we can add, which are always buttons or sections to group some buttons, because it's a toolbar, so we have to add only actions there. And I'll just add the button before the save, and we can see that it has a check mark, which means that we are editing that button, and it's a custom one. For the IDs, we can have different namings. It always depends on best practices or whatever we have in mind for the moment. I like to do button. I did not button. We have to create a command because this is the button which executes a command when we click it. And we have to fill these fields, and these are the icons. There is a alternative, we don't load the icon, and there is a tooltip when we hover the mouse over it, and there is a tooltip description because there is the tooltip here is form and the description is open this form in the form editor. And let's start by autofill, and label is autofill. As you can see, it's modifying in real time, let's say, the data here, because I changed the label and it's showing here. And autofill, it uses uh, cutting edge AI to autofill contact information. And you can write whatever you want. If you write this line, then it will sell itself. Then if we want to add an icon to our button, we can use an existing one, or we can include a web resource with an icon and choose that icon in our button. But we have to include the resources before start opening this solution, because as I mentioned before, it's downloading the solution by exporting it. Or in the local state of the solution. So I will not add the images. Modern image is the vectorial one. I don't know if you know the difference between a vectorial image and a classical bitmap image, let's say. And let's start by creating a command for our, and we can click the plus here to create a command. And what we want to do for our command is we can say command autofill and add an action, and the action will be a JavaScript action, and we'll choose the library from what we had, and I have to find the library I added to the solution, which is commands. This is why it's important to use this convention with the slashes, because all commands will be next to each other, for example. Or if we use, when we'll learn about the doing customizations from HTML, then we can use the relative paths, because there will be the HTML will be in the base directory, let's say, so we can go as a relative path. If we want to use this, we will just write command load script, let's say, and command / contact pick autofill.js. Now the function name will be, we haven't created it yet, but it will be as before, ctl contact dot auto filler, or autofill handler, which is because almost all functions we add are event handlers. That's why I add the handler as a name. And then it's important, let's say, to if we need the context in our action, like we saw in the JavaScript web resource that we had in the form, we could check a parameter to pass the execution context. In the ribbon workbench, it's called CRM parameter, and we have to we have a lot of options here, but what we need to pass is primary control, which means we will pass the context of the execution of this command. And then we can configure the display rules and the enable rules, which for us, let's say, we can name these ones always in relation to our autofill functionality, and we can add the step. We want to display our button if the form state, that's why if the form state is in the creating. So I'll choose create here, which means we want only to have our functionality if we're creating new contacts, so we can uh, simplify the data input by suggesting some data from our artificial intelligence. So this is the display rule. I want only when form state is create, and the enable rule. It's important to specify both, or our command will not display. Um, we'll have the same rule, let's say, because uh, we don't want to display our button, let's say, disabled in the form, because if it's disabled, it means that it's not doing anything. The disabled state, for example, might serve in cases where we want to have our button visible, and the enabled or disabled state depends on data from the form. For example, if I have in the contact, if you remember, I can show you. If I have specified the company, I want uh, the functionality to be enabled, because it's important, for example, for my autofill to get some data from the company, so I can autofill the data for the contact. And probably we'll do that, but it's not this time. We can do that as an exercise to have it to have the display rule different from the enable rule and see how it behaves. So the only thing that it's left here is that we haven't specified the command. We created it, but we haven't chosen it in our button properties. Now that we did our customization, we can publish, and in theory it should display our new button. When it finishes, it takes a little bit of time for the reasons that I explained, that it is doing parsing and let's say recreating some XML files with the logic that we implemented in a graphical interface, and then it's importing the solution in the system, and now it's publishing it. It tells it's the state of the operations. Publishing solution means that it's doing publish customizations. When this finishes, I'll go in the form and refresh, and we'll see that our button should be visible if we did everything right. But it has no functionality because our JavaScript is not written yet. And this guy here is called Duro, which is the creator of the tool. Okay, it finished. Now, if I refresh, I should have this custom here, which I don't know why I thought that I named it autofill. Why is it custom? Hmm. This is interesting. Why is it custom and not autofill? Probably a bug. To check that that is our button, I'll just do a quick trick, and I don't remember the function name, so I'll go and copy paste it here. And to actually be able to do that, I have to do okay. And equals function. This will be the context. Okay. I really have no idea why this displays custom here and not what we specified. We can check the Ribbon Workbench repository if there is a known bug, let's say with the latest version, but I'm not sure of what happened. And now it's showing us autofill. Probably it was because the script file was empty and there is some bug. If I click this, it says it's executing my script, and to actually, and I can see in the console log, because I console log the context of the click, and I can, okay, I thought I could be able to do that, but okay, I was in the wrong uh, iframe, let's say. So that's why it was not allowing me to save that state. Now that I have the context, I can see what uh, get is called event source. And why is it in proxy? Ah, yeah. Because this is not an form event handler, let's say, but what we can, I don't remember what's the name of the Yeah, I can do the get form context, and then from the form context I can do get control, which I have to see what control I want to modify. Then we are just debugging, and then we will implement the functionality from Visual Studio and do our customization in the right way. So I'll use this show logical name, and probably the job title will be something, will be set by us to something. Set value AI guru. It does not have a set value, it has only a get value, but we can do get attribute. So let's say that our functionality will set, since we are doing the autofill, we will set some values here like I did in the by debugging with the developer tools of Chrome. But now we will implement the functionality from Visual Studio. We'll create a new project. And when it decides to open, so create a new project, Node.js project, and it was contact.autofill handler, and contact.autofill handler, and it's my PC is really busy doing something that I don't know what it is. Or not. Ding. Dobra. And we can close the ribbon workbench because we made our button appear in the right form, and I didn't show you that this button will be visible only when the form is in the create state. If I actually create the contact, which this new contact is all of you, and the job title is AI Guru, and I can save. And as you can notice, my custom command just disappeared because it was only when the form is in the create state. When I'm creating new contacts, I can see the autofill. When it's in the modify state, I cannot see it. It's not there. So if Visual Studio it's in a loop, actually I think that writing this code is like 99.9% similar to what we did in the plugin for Java, in the JavaScript plugin. So I'm not going through it again. You can just review that other training. Do you have any question about this functionality?